Alright, so we are back in the world of the first Descendant, and today I want to do a tier list. I haven't done this since the launch of, the first Descendant, and it's time for Season 1. It's right around the corner. I have built every single character in the game. I have played every single character in the game, and I have mastered the vast majority of them, have touched them to some degree and understand their basics of their kit, and I think I have a good idea of how Descendants fare against one another. I recently saw a lot of videos going over a tier list of the current Descendants, and I did feel like some of those opinions were made from someone who usually played mainly one or two Descendants, maybe even four of the same Descendant. It wasn't really grasping the idea of every Descendant. So I kind of want to weigh in from my perspective and just, tell you guys how it is. I don't want to waste any more time. Let's dive right on into the tier list. Alright, so we are over here on the tier list, guys, and as you can see here, we have the tier list maker. I'm going to have something playing in the top right. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe a build video I have. I don't know, to keep you guys entertained. But we're going to start off with the, let's do mobbing first. I think mobbing is fair. I'm not going to really do ultimate Descendants. I guess we can touch on the normal ones and maybe say something, add some nuance whenever there's some nuance to be added, but we're not going to do the ultimate Descendants. And let's start off with the mobbing. And I want to start off really strong with the best one just so we can get this out of the way because we already know where this is going to go. And we have Bunny. Bunny is the S tier mobber. This is the preferred mobber. You need to build her because she has to be built because she does all the farming in the game. There is no Descendant in the game that even compares remotely close. Her damage comes out too fast, her mana efficiency is too high, her speed is too high, and she does way too much. Compared to every other Descendant in the entire game, no Descendant can accomplish these things, which kind of makes a lot of the other Descendants feel pretty stale. But hopefully in the future, when Nexon eventually adds more HP to mobs, where Descendants like Bunny can't just instantly kill them somehow, maybe these other Descendants get some playtime, but unfortunately, the only thing you need to build is Bunny, and Bunny will do every single thing. Next, we have Valby, and I'm gonna go down the list normally now. And Valby, in my opinion, is actually an A-tier mobber for a lot of reasons. One, she has really good area coverage. She's fast. She can phase through things. She can just put down a lot of AoE damage all over the floor, and it persists for a long time, and it does a lot of damage. She actually has specific farms for her that do really well. Others can kind of do it, but in my opinion, she is definitely a great mobbing Descendant that definitely get a lot of value. Next, we have the Enzo man, and as someone who is an Enzo main, I really have a lot of love for this Descendant, but unfortunately, he has a few problems that doesn't make him a great mobber. I think he's a D tier mobber for the most part. He's not really great. If this was a farmer, I would easily put him in A tier because he brings a lot of utility for volts and stuff like that. Maybe that's a B tier condition. But from a mobbing perspective, he's not the best mobber. A lot of cases, you just go use someone else. Next, we have Blair, and I actually think Blair is a B tier mobber. He's actually not terrible at it, especially if there's a lot of stationary targets. As long as Bunny isn't there, he can actually get a lot of things done. As long as Bunny isn't there, anyone can do something. But the thing is, he actually has really good AoE coverage, and if you build him correctly, he actually can do it. I think the only problem with him is he has to kind of stand on top of it to cast. That's where a lot of the other AoE killers don't really even need to stand on top of it. But ultimately, he's still a really good mobber, so I definitely think he's a B tier. Next, we have Isimo. And SMO, in my opinion, is it's hard to say. I think he's a C tier because he does have AoE and he can put things down. I think the problem with Isimo, for example, is that he has very long cast animations, and a lot of times his mines get stuck. And also, I feel like the way he really is structured, you kind of want to build up a lot of bombs and blow up rather than blow up individually. And I don't like the fact that his detonator require mana on top of throwing down his abilities as well. So that's kind of yikes, but he does have good AoE coverage and he has good damage overall if you can get them out. So I think he's at least a C tier. Next, we have Jaber. He doesn't work, so he's F tier as far as I'm concerned. Until they fix him, he needs to be his things need to scale properly, and he needs to be higher. They need to fix him. Sorry, I can't put him higher than that. Next, we have Kyle, and Kyle is actually kind of in the same boat as Isimo. I actually don't think he's that bad of a mobber if you build him correctly. He does have really good mana efficiency. Actually, he doesn't require any mana. And then if you get really good cooldowns, you can actually do some sizable AoE on your abilities. Is it as good as Blair, or is it good as Valby? No, not necessarily, but it's actually pretty decent. This actually kind of goes for Sharon as well too. If you use her void domination, I think it's called, she actually gets quite a few swords, and if you do build her properly, you can actually get some decent amount of like AoE out of it. The only problem is you gotta super invest in cooldown. It does like lose over half her damage or something crazy like that. Like a lot of her Transcendent mods do that. I think that's why she's in such a bad state in general, because like a lot of her Transcendent mods make her like lose so much damage. It's super punishing compared to other Descendants for like no reason. Next we have Eugen. I don't think Eugen can mob from what I can tell. I don't play him as much, I will be fair on that, but I don't know how good he is. I guess I could put him in F tier because I don't think he deals damage with his skills. I think I saw a clip of something on Reddit, but I don't think he actually does damage with his skill. Next we have Lepic. Now Lepic in my opinion is actually an A tier mobber. I think people put him really low. I'll have a clip on the screen for you guys to actually see it. But the reason why Lepic is great is because his traction grenade is absolutely crazy. If you properly, and I think this is a lot of the misconceptions with most of the Descendants, a lot of people don't build them properly and then start to put them in lower tiers. If you build like Lepic properly with his traction grenade, which is absolutely bonkers, he can actually just pull everything in the entire map really close to you. I did a little farm with Bunny the other day, and we had like 2 Lepics and 2 Bunnies, and we were just destroying everything because we can just pull the whole world. And if you properly build around that, you can easily just like blow everything up in one like grenade or whatever you do, you know, so it's really good. Next we have Ajax, and Ajax is probably my second most played Descendant, and I have multiple builds on him. And in my opinion, he is at least an A tier mobber. Why? Because if you properly build him, once again, he can spam spells, he has really high mobility, and his AoE is absolutely insane. And he can even stun on a lot of his AoE abilities with like very little cooldown. If we're talking about the overall impact, I can easily spam just as much as someone like a Valby, or spam as much as someone like a Lepic, for example, and easily deal good AoE damage. My current Ajax can do like 400,000 damage or something every single cast, and it takes like 1 second with a huge AoE, and I'm pretty mana efficient. So I think that's way too much value to put him lower than an A tier. Is he better than Buddy? No, no one is. But he absolutely can mob with the best of them if you build him correctly. Next we have Vyessa, and this one's a little hard because when we look at what Vyessa does, which she does have like really good AoE coverage with her Blizzard, and if you use certain skills you could get like good AoE like to stay there for a good amount of time with duration and stuff. I don't think she brings as much skill spam as Descendants like Mr. Ajax here, or even like Valby, where she has like really good AoE coverage. I think Vyessa has good coverage, but I don't think she compared to Valby in coverage, and I don't think she compared to Ajax's spam. I can literally do 1 second spam on Ajax properly, so that's something important. I know a lot of players are going to be like, well, Vyessa is better, she can do AoE and stuff like that, but if you build Ajax properly, he can easily spam higher than her. He has a lot of utility with his traction. He can pull things in, and that's why I don't think Vyessa is better than these 3 Descendants specifically, because she does have to put things down on the ground. She is really mana hungry, and while she can spam like with the cold-blooded, I don't think she has as much utility. She doesn't have AoE pulling like this guy have, so he can easily group, and that's way more value than what she does. She doesn't have more coverage than Valby, and she doesn't have more spam than Ajax. So this is why I'm putting her lower than Vyessa. I know I'm still going to get a lot of heat for this, but I still think these are way better mobbers when built correctly than Vyessa. Next we have Freyna, and Freyna is actually pretty decent, though she is very reliant on Contagion. I think a lot of Descendants are reliant on one module. I think she's a much better mobber than she is like a bosser. I think the problem I have with Freyna is I don't play her as much, so it's hard to really place her as high as or low. I do think she's like somewhere around here. I'm gonna be a little safe and put her B, because I do think like her mobbing isn't as consistent. Is that fair? It's hard to say, guys, on this one. This one's really hard in my opinion. Maybe you guys could tell me where you put Freyna, but I'm gonna put her B tier. I think she's slightly better than Blair. I don't even think she's that better than Blair. Blair can keep things on the ground for a long time, and he has good zone control. I think she's ranged though, and a lot of her abilities will like proc her Contagion if you build around it. So I'm gonna put her B. I think she's B above Blair. I'm gonna put it here, don't be mad, but I don't think she's better than these Descendants at mobbing. But I do think she's on par with these Descendants. Finally, Glay. I think she's actually an A tier. Her AoE is really good, but I think most glades don't really build her that way, so maybe that's where I would put her lower. But like, if we're talking about actually properly building her, I think she is actually an A tier mobber. Her AoE is really good. Her resource efficiency is really high. Like, she's generally a very resource efficient Descendant. She gets free ammo, she gets free like mana, she doesn't have to worry about shields, so she kind of just basically built for health, and then she covers literally everything, which is why she's a broken Descendant. So I think I'm gonna put her A tier. I think she's A tier. So that's my rankings on the mobbing. Just keep in mind, these 4 are nowhere near as high as her. Alright, so we reset it, and we're gonna do it again, and this is gonna be for bossing, and I'm actually going to put them in the same like list. I am going to put supports within the list as well, because it is important to rate them appropriately. I think putting them in the support tab is really a cop-out and not really explaining what the kit brings to the table, and I do think each Descendant should be rated alongside each other, so I will do it for bossing as well. So from a bossing perspective, we're going to start with Bunny, and she's an A tier bosser. Why? She can do a lot in the current like bosses that we have. She can like control mobs very easy, which is actually pretty important in a lot of cases. She can kill like things like obstructor balls with her like running around, which is really good too. There are more poison enemies that are bosses than any other type, which means she has a good matchup against bosses, and she doesn't necessarily need to actually shoot at enemies because her lightning emissions is actually very overtuned and busted and haven't been fixed yet. So it's actually really strong to the point where she doesn't even need to like use her gun. So very good, very solid bosser, and one of the best in the game. Next we have Lepic, and I know a lot of people want to put him S tier, but I actually think he's an A tier Descendant. When it comes to consistency, I don't think he's consistently a better Descendant than a lot of the other S tier Descendants, and I don't think he actually brings to the table more than what those S tier Descendants does, for a couple of reasons. First off, he does require super hyper investment to be able to be viable, and because of that super investment, I don't think that's good. A lot of the other Descendants don't need that type of super investment. Just get supply, firearm, enhancer on Enzo, and you're doing really good. That's pretty much it. Same with Glay, you just get Predator Instinct or whatever she builds, and you're pretty good to go as a bossing Descendant. Also with bosses like Gluttony coming out, and probably a lot of the future bosses, that like burst build is definitely going to be falling off very heavily. Of course, he's very good against the weak bosses, and that's very true, but I don't really look at that as a measure of how good a Descendant is. The measure of a good Descendant is how good they are against every boss. He's very much a one-trick pony in my opinion. If you're not competent, which I feel like most Lepic players aren't because they're trying to skip mechanics instead of actually playing, he actually can be a detriment to your team in a lot of cases. And even with some of the not so strong bosses like Molten Fortress, he can actually kind of not really burst them without having multiple Lepics. In my opinion, he is a solid A tier for now, and I think that's actually going to continue to go down as the game gets more updates. So next we have Eugen. Eugen is, it's hard to really say, but if we're judging it based on the current game itself, I think he's a C tier because damage is king, and unfortunately the way the game is designed, being a support doesn't really mean anything more than just killing something. Yeah, you can resurrect bad players, or you can just kill, and that's more invaluable in my opinion, because I don't really think that the measure of a good Descendant is whenever you're playing with bad players. I think when you're playing with like average players, how well is this Descendant going to be useful, and I don't think Eugen is that useful in the current meta. Next we have Jaber. He's F. He's broken. He will continue to be F until the dev team decides to fix him. Whenever that happens, who knows, but he's still broken, so F. Next we have Enzo. He's S tier for a couple of reasons. Main is he gives every single Descendant the ability to actually do damage, and if you build him correctly, you can actually make it so that at all times your allies can absolutely do tons of crit damage irregardless of what they have on their current kit. It is absolutely broken, and it's his best module, and it makes him really strong. Unrelated to the tier list, I am concerned that whenever he gets his ultimate version, that his mods, just like Valby's recent mods, say what you want, they're trash, are just not as good as Supply Moisture. So hopefully they can like make them good, but I don't think so. I think we're going to be using Supply Firearm Enhancer for a very long time. Oh, and I've been seeing a lot of shield hate from a lot of players. You guys really need to understand how shield work. He is actually a god tier shielder if you use him correctly. Yeah, just wanted to add that in because the shield slander is insane on Enzo. He's like my tankiest Descendant, second tankiest Descendant by quite a large margin. Next we have Isamo. In my experience, Isamo is a solid C tier character. He's generally a C in everything I put him in. But here's why. First off, he does do decent damage when you super build into him. I just saw some okay builds with him that works pretty okay. But the problem is he's still not that great. He does require a lot of investment, and compared to other Descendants that you like would invest into, he still do less than them compared to the amount of like materials you need to put in to actually like build them properly. So in my opinion, because of those, if that makes sense, I hope that made sense. He just costs too much to get a lesser result than other Descendants. That's what I'm trying to say. So I don't think he's that great, and his damage can be a little slow. Kyle is kind of in the same boat. He can do a lot of damage. I have seen some good build with him, but once again, you can build other Descendants and get a better result for less investment, and therefore I think he's worse. And then he, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Next we have Sharon. From a bossing perspective, do I want to put her B? Her weak point stuff is really valuable. Like being able to make things weak is really, really good. And then her like defense shred thing is actually really good too if you build it correctly. I think as a Descendant, for what she brings from a bossing standpoint, is actually a B tier. Because the defense shred is very, very high and she's a support Descendant. And the fact that she can do really good like weak point damage, she gotta do a lot. Like, don't get me wrong, she gotta press buttons, roll around like a maniac, do a bunch of stuff that a Glade just has to just shoot. But because of the defense shred thing that she does, and because she can do weak point stuff, I'm gonna put her B because those are very valuable things. Next we have Freyna. I think she's D. She's not very good. Her ultimate weapon is trash. She requires like mobs to be next to them to do damage and stuff, and then she doesn't really get her passive benefits because there's generally not a lot of enemies like getting the poison stuff. She's also a caster to some degree, but she wants to do indirect damage as a caster. I don't know, her kit's very funky. I'm not really looking forward to Ultimate Freyna if I'm being honest. I don't think she's gonna be very good unless they give her like a supply firearm enhancer kind of thing, which they probably will to make her viable. Next we have Vyessa, and Vyessa is really decent. She can be a little mana hungry, which is kind of annoying. She's a very mana hungry Descendant. I put her between B and A. I think a lot of times the reason why I put her B, I think I'm gonna put her high B. I don't think she's an A tier Descendant. The reasons why is because she requires a lot of spamming. I do think she needs to be fairly built to be as effective as a lot of the Descendants, and also I feel like I have slot problems with her. I think I need like everything critted out. I think I can barely put very little defense on her to be like as effective as someone like Lepic, for example. He doesn't need defense to be effective because you just burst. And then his ultimate is kind of nice to like keep him alive because it actually rewards bad players and like hurt good players. And she doesn't really have anything like that. She doesn't have any like defense barrier. So next we have Blair. He's a D tier as well. Honestly, he could be F in my opinion, but he can kill Dead Bride. I know the other players, you can kill Dead Bride, but I can too with like my gun like in 2 seconds. But the problem with Blair is he requires super investment, has a very clunky kit, very clunky playstyle. Yeah, you can throw some like meteors at the enemy and do 14 million damage, but the cast animation is long, the projectile moves too slow, and if you fight anything that's slightly mobile, you miss it so much, and it's just really bad. And then in a lot of cases when you build that way, he kind of gets the same thing Vyessa gets, where he doesn't have enough slots to be able to be defensive, and he's super squishy. He doesn't have AoE. He's like standing next to the boss with no type of like sustain or defense. It's really bad. He's in a really poor state. He's just as, I want to put him with Jaber, but Jaber's broken, so that's why I'm putting Jaber in F. But yeah, he's really bad. Next we have Valby. Valby's actually an A tier, kind of the same reason why he's an S tier, because they basically have the same skills. Because that's kind of how most of the Descendants work for bossing. Press a button and do a lot of damage with their guns, and that's kind of what she does. She throws something on the ground and do a lot of damage with her guns. The reason why she's lower than Enzo is one, because it's mainly because she doesn't give it to the whole team. He does fairly easy, and she's still a little mana hungry even with like her like properly built up, and she's a little squishy properly built up too. He doesn't require much. He just need cooldown and like duration, and he's fine for the most part. She actually needs like a lot of things like mana sustain and efficiency and a few other things. That's why she's lower. So yeah, she's A tier though. She's super good with one mod, which is kind of sad for most of these Descendants. Next we have Ajax. Ajax is a really weird Descendant because I do think there's a misconception of how this Descendant is played, and I think a lot of players rate him too low because they don't actually play him correctly. So for me, I'm putting him actually low A tier, high B tier. Is he better than Vyessa? I actually think so, for a couple of reasons, and I'll explain it from someone who actually pretty much mains Ajax, so you guys understand his kit. He has the ability to move around the map really quickly. He's defensive and he can res, and I said that for Eugen, like, what's so good about resing when you can just kill? And that's true, but the difference is he can help players stand their ground, and that's actually really important. Whenever your like DPS doesn't have to move and dodge mechanics, you give your team so much more damage than just Eugen throwing a heal out, right? So they're not feeling like they have to move out of the way because you have this huge barrier stopping them from like getting hit, so they can continue to DPS. On top of that, his bubble can actually give enhanced like firearm, and if you use my recent build where you use a passionate sponsor, you can give him himself a lot of firearm attack, making him actually do some decent damage. I think there's a massive misconception with him because players just straight up play him wrong, but if you actually understand his kit like I do, you'll see that he's actually an A tier character. The only problem is he's really hard to play compared to other Descendants, and a lot of teammates don't play really well together, and so that's kind of why it's not as good. But he's actually an A tier Descendant in my opinion. So yeah, really good. Finally, we have Glay, and I just want to put her S. I think she's worse than Enzo, but better than everyone else. Mainly because, well, a lot of the reasons why she's decent at mobbing. She doesn't have to rely on shielding, which I think players like to think that's a negative, which is not. You're more streamlined on what you build. She has the second highest defense in her ultimate form, which is absolutely insane. She has to only build for HP, which is really great, and she actually get access to a lot of mods that require like a broken shield condition. She is very resource efficient. The only thing she has to manage at any given time is her HP, and she doesn't have to manage ammo like every other Descendant in the entire game except for Enzo. And she gets a lot of damage from her, like her Transcendent mods actually has almost never any negatives compared to like someone like Sharon, who has nothing but negatives on every single one of her Transcendent mods, losing all her damage. But someone like Glay, for example, she gets nothing but positives on most of them, and then she has like the most Transcendent mods in the game. Like, it's super weighed in favor of Glay, and that's why she's such a good Descendant. She's super resource efficient, super easy to play, super easy to build, got the best Transcendent mods, and she's really resource efficient. She's like broken. And there you have it, guys. That is the breakdown that I believe is a more accurate representation of the tier list in the current meta of the first Descendant. I tried to be fair with every Descendant, taking into consideration each and every one of their kits compared to each other and situations, and I feel like this is a very accurate representation of the current meta. Sadly, Jaber can't be ranked because he's broken and they refuse to fix him. So I'll continue to hammer them on Twitter until they do something about it. But yeah, that's gonna be it for this one, guys. If you liked the video, consider leaving me a like as well as subscribing to the channel. Let me know what you think I missed. I'm stubborn and I don't think I did anything wrong here, but let me know. Maybe maybe the Sharon pick was a little weird in the mobbing section, but we'll see. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys.